We now begin with the very first session of Day 2 of Festival of Ideas 2023. We're beginning with world-renowned Professor Walter K. Andersen, American academic and author. He's going to be speaking on RSS from the outside. This session will be moderated by Dr. Aishwarya Pandit Sharma, convener of Festival of Ideas. I request Walter K. Andersen and Dr. Pandit to please take their positions on the stage. Can we have a round of applause for Professor Walter K. Andersen? This is a session that, of course, many people, age no bar, have been looking forward to. So we will, in just a few moments, have a riveting conversation with Professor Walter Andersen on RSS from the outside. And this session, of course, like I said, is being moderated by Dr. Aishwarya Pandit Sharma, convener, Festival of Ideas. Dr. Sharma, over to you, ma'am.
Hello, hello.
Hello. Very warm welcome to you, Dr. Andersen, and thank you for taking out time for the event. You can't imagine there's so many people who are very excited, and you can't imagine how many people have asked me what timing is the session. So there are a lot of people who will be watching you online as well as here. We're going to be talking about a very exciting topic, which is the RSS, and there could be no, I could not think of anyone better to discuss the RSS with someone who has worked extensively and written two very detailed and highly well-researched books on the RSS. It's an organization which has huge impact on our politics ever since its inception. It has been a topic of debate and discussion because a large part of it remains mysterious, misunderstood. I think we'll, through the course of our session, try and unpack the RSS for our audience and try to understand the organization. Over to you if you could give us a brief overview of the RSS and what encouraged you to work on a topic.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, it's my privilege to be here at what is a great moment for India with the moon landing and the international coverage of that, and also an economy which is the fastest growing of the major economies. I was just saying, I wish I was 30 years younger so I could be working on what is a country that's on the way up, both domestically as well as internationally. Thank you for inviting me to talk about this and to mention my books on the RSS. I'll say a little bit more about that in a few minutes. I actually got involved in working on the RSS in a somewhat accidental way. I was at the University of Chicago preparing a dissertation topic, and I was thinking of doing a study of how young people get involved in politics. My advisors, Lloyd and Suzanne Rudolph, and many of you have probably read their books, said to me, why don't you do something on the RSS? They had just interviewed Gowalkar. He did not give many interviews to foreigners, but he did give it to them because he had read their books as well. And they said, we can probably get arrangements for you to see Gowalkar, which they did, in a matter of fact. And so I did. And out of that dissertation came a book, The Brotherhood in Saffron. If you want to buy a copy of it, you can go to Bari Brothers right down the road. They have a copy. And in fact, they'll be autographed. Every time I go there, he has me sign the various copies of the books that are there. But we have another book that came out later, but I'll talk about that in a few minutes. One thing I had to do, because there was so little written on the RSS up to that point, and comparatively little now that's objective about, I mean, you can see books which are all praise, but more which are kind of negative, but there are a few which are quite good. And so I had to sort of dig to find out, you know, what this organization was all about. One name that kept coming up was K.B. Hedgewar, the founder. He was in many ways a fascinating person. He came from a family of Hindu priests. They were Telugu Brahmins in the very ethnically plural city of Nagpur, where you had various languages spoken on the street. It was a kind of small Delhi of its time for central India. And he was motivated to get involved in politics by Mr. Munjay, who was a Congress politician in Maharashtra, the central provinces. And he went to Calcutta to study medicine, where he studied Western medicine in Calcutta. But perhaps more important for his future career, he also got involved with some of the revolutionary societies in Calcutta and became enthusiastic about doing something. When he got back to Nagpur, there were some communal problems in Nagpur. Then there was the efforts to address the issue of independence. All of them, he felt the Hindu community had not done well in responding to these challenges that it had. And what was the problem? And it was a problem that he and later the RSS would focus on, and that was a division in the Hindu community, divisions caused by caste. Some of the divisions are inbuilt about the hierarchy that you have in the caste, but you have divisions of language, you have divisions of economic opportunity. He felt that what we needed to do is to create a more united Hindu community, and until that happened, you are not likely to get a serious movement of independence. But one thing more was needed that didn't exist, and that was an organization to train young men in leading a movement for the uplift and independence of India, hence the RSS. It was founded in 1925 on Vijay Dashmi Day, which incidentally, keep that day in mind, because every year on that day, the head of the RSS gives the major policy speech. So if you're interested in RSS policy, read Vijay Dashmi speeches. They're vetted by everybody in the organization, and they're carefully thought out, and they're policy-oriented. And these days, more policy-oriented, because I'll say in a few minutes, the RSS has become more policy-directed than it was in the past, and so speaks out on those issues. So, Hedgewar was the founding member. He set the program for the RSS, the domestic program, which was a combination of calisthenics, because he felt you needed a healthy body, as well as stories of the heroes of Hinduism, because you needed a pride, he argued, in what Hinduism was all about. He was also very much influenced by two thinkers, one Italian and one Indian. The Italian thinker was Giovanni Mazzini, who lived in the 19th century, who argued what you needed was an Italy that could combine, because it was a series of small states, and Italians who could think of themselves as Italians. And so he defined in that book what he felt to be Italian was all about, and why you needed a united Italy. Savarkar, I'm almost reluctant to say anything about Savarkar. You have the world's authority on Savarkar, who is about to speak here, and his book is in the back, or his two books, but I'll say it anyway. Savarkar was a great influence on Hedgewar and other RSS thinkers as well. He really developed the idea of Hindutva. Now, someone has asked me, and I'm sure people here think, what does Hindutva mean? I just read in the newspaper that another political party has adopted Hindutva as one of its planks in the coming election, which is unusual, I think, but nonetheless, there it is. Read the newspaper, you'll see it on page 2. So what does Hindutva mean? We must, in interviewing people for the books on the RSS, we would ask them, what does Hindutva mean? We must have gotten 200 different definitions of what it means. And I'd be curious to see what the people in this other party felt Hindutva means. But Savarkar was very explicit what he meant. It had to do with this body of land that is South Asia, contemporary India and Pakistan, Nepal, and probably into Central Asia. And it was unifying Hindus. What does it mean? And that's been a major objective of both Hedgewar and subsequently the RSS. What do you need to do to create a more united community? And he was very explicit negative on caste, and especially the caste hierarchy. And he realized that would be an enormous effort. But part of the objective of the RSS shakas, the local units, is to create a sense of oneness among the people or participants. They have camps, and at these camps, and I noted in my book about how they organize camps, they even drop caste names. You may not even know what a caste person is. On one day at these camps, a person may be serving food, and you know the significance of that to someone else. And on the other day, they may be polishing shoes. So the idea was that you mix responsibilities, that there is no hierarchy of work. Work is work. Work is admirable, whatever it is. And you don't have to have sort of a hierarchy of some work is good and some work is bad or some work is polluting. They really felt that idea of pollution was something that should be ignored. I think when you think of the RSS, keep that in mind, because that's been central in its thinking of what it needs to do. And Hedgevar really set the groundwork. Something, though, that he also set the groundwork for, which was equally important, was he established the training system of full-time workers, the pracharaks. And that was a brilliant stroke. When the Rudolphs talked to me about what impressed them about the RSS, it was their workers, the full-time workers. They tend to be educated young men who spend a couple of years in training, and then they become something called Vistaraks, people who are kind of like interns. And then it's judged whether they have the capability to work full-time. One of the capabilities, can they do like this? Can they get up with a microphone, give you 2 minutes and say something? So you've got to be able to interact with your audiences. And they trained them in doing that sort of thing, and they still do. And my impression, the pracharaks I've met are very capable. You saw one last night, Ram Madhav, a very impressive person. Who they have sort of given responsibilities for. And I've long had admiration, but you get a sense through him what the pracharaks were. Modi, the Prime Minister of India, was a pracharak, where in the work that he did, he very much impressed the people who were around him in politics, the BJP. And they brought him first as the Chief Minister to Gujarat, and then eventually the Prime Minister of India. People tell me that if you listen to the Prime Minister, he speaks in ways that are fascinating, interesting, and he directs attention to the audience. Did all of you watch the landing of the moon? Did you notice the Prime Minister was on? He not once praised himself. He praised the group that were there who did it. Now, he was pleased as punch that this had happened when he was in Johannesburg. But he had that ability. He has that ability to speak on the cuff quickly and in ways that are inspiring. But the hotel I was staying at when the event happened, I heard, and I was home at the time, I heard people getting out and cheering. They were cheering. Obviously something, and I thought, oh, of course what it is. The spacecrafts have landed on the south pole of the moon. And of course this gives extra prestige to him in Johannesburg and to India as a country. And I think this will inspire many young people, men and women, to go into this field, which I think is what he had in mind in his public comments about all this. Well, Hedgevar, in the late 30s, realized the world was headed in a time of trouble. And he selected a very unusual person to succeed him. And there was some controversy, including from Dattatreya Deoras, who actually left the RSS because he felt that Golwalkar, MS Golwalkar, the successor, can you hear me?
You have to hold it like
I have to hold it close. Okay. Is this okay? Okay? This way. This way?
Yeah.
Can anybody hear me? Okay, I'm not going to repeat everything I just said. I understand if you want to listen to it, you can see TV tonight. There'll be a program of this. Anyway, the idea was that the time of troubles were coming. You needed someone who was steady And so M.S. Golwalkar was selected. M.S. Golwalkar was very different. He was personally religious, whereas Hedgewar was not. And Savarkar was agnostic, if not an atheist. This will probably come up in the panel that you have. He was not, in this conventional sense of the term, he was not religious. But they set in motion a notion of Hinduism and Hindutva that was a very secular notion. It was not religious. And this, a lot of people get the RSS wrong. It's not a religious organization, has never been. And when it talks about, India, Hindutva, it talks about it in a conventionally non-religious way. It is an organization geared to, at least in the Indian context, uniting Hindus. It now accepts Muslims and Christians, but I'll talk about that in a second. But uniting all Hindus together. This is why the present head of the RSS talks about Muslims as Hindus. He really means Hinduism in a kind of generic cultural sense. It's like being German or being Danish. There is a history of ideas associated in an area of land which has been associated with that, and that's really what he is referring to when he says Muslims and Christians are Hindu. But he means by that culturally. He doesn't mean by that a conventional religious terminology of what's meant. So he chose Golwalkar. Golwalkar was a religious man, but he was also a fantastic organizer. And he realized that the RSS would need somebody in these time of troubles to help organize the group. And I had a sense of that myself. As I mentioned, the Rudolphs, and some of you in the audience may know about the RSS, Eknath Ranade, the name, he was a head of the RSS in this area when I was at Delhi University. And I would go over to meet him every month or so, and we'd talk about philosophy, something we both had an interest in. One day he said to me, "Would you like to meet Golwalkar?" Of course, I would like to meet Golwalkar. I'll arrange it. And sure enough, someone from the university who was an RSS member came to me one day and said, on this day, at this hour, someone's going to come pick you up, take you to Delhi train station, put you on the train, and send you to Mumbai. I did that. It was at 6 o'clock in the morning. I distinctly remember. I had to be ready at 5 as I waited for this person to come at 6 to take me to the train station to get on the train. At Mumbai, a person who later worked closely with me, Sridhar Damle, went with me to Nagpur. And we stayed and we met, and then we were taken to the home of the labor leader of the RSS affiliate. And then we went to see Golwalkar, who was, as I must say, very gracious. I had heard Golwalkar could be very curt and direct. And in a sense he was, but I had come from an academic background. I was accustomed to academics who were both curt and frank, and he was both. I'll never forget one of my meetings, I quoted something incorrectly to him. He stopped for a minute, looked at a colleague, he said, "Is that right?" What he just said. And he said, "Get me the book." And then he quoted from the book, which was not right, when I had missed a key point. But that was the kind of man he was. He was frank, and he was concerned about the organization. I had breakfast and lunch with him every day in the time we were there. During that time, he didn't waste his time. What's this? He would eat quickly and then use the time to confer about the organization. Who is there? Is that person doing well? I could see why Hedgewar chose him. He was concerned about maintaining the organization which he had, in a sense, inherited. And in the RSS, the Sarsangchalak has actually considerable authority, but he has to manage it in a way and why he needs a good general secretary. General secretaries are normally, for those of you who are interested in what the future is like, is normally the next person to come if they do a good job. And so for those of you who are interested, look closely at Hosobole, who is the general secretary, a very competent person. Okay, Golwalker's chosen, and he does, I think, what Hedgewar wanted him to do. He kept the organization stable until, his death in 1973. Then he chose somebody, this is Golwalker, which was somewhat surprising too, someone who's much like the founder, Hedgewar. He was a social activist who was concerned about the goal of the RSS, which is unifying Hinduism. His very first major speech, for those of you who followed the RSS, you'll know about the incident I'm about to mention, was in Pune at a conference on, somewhat like this, a conference on ideas. And he gave a very direct speech attacking caste, attacking the caste system. And there was a lot of speculation, particularly in the Orthodox Hindu community. What is this person doing? What's he going to be like as the head of the RSS? Well, he turned out to be like Hedgewar. He was a social reformer. He opened the door of the RSS to Muslims and Muslims and Christians. And that was not a surprising move for those who knew him. He felt that these people are Indian too. We have to include them as part of a general sense of who Indians are, and they are Indians. So he did that. And
Dr. Andersen, if in that sense, can we say that Balasaheb Ambedkar was the most transformational figure that the RSS had?
Yes. Actually, that's a great point. I mean, when he came, he really transformed the RSS. He brought it back to what it had been under Hedgewar, a group that had socially conscious, but with one or two critical differences. You had an independent India, and you had a time of troubles in India as well, economic and other words. So what he did is he pushed the affiliated organizations, and these are critical. The affiliated organizations of the RSS is the public face of the RSS. It's the BJP is an affiliated organization. The current prime minister is a former Pracharak who got into politics. You have India's largest student group, the Vidyarthi Parishad, is affiliated with them. Its largest labor union, the Mazdoor Sangh, is affiliated with them. And you have about 100 others. And they go into all parts of Indian society. In my view, this is the real strength of the RSS. Now, all of these organizations are also autonomous, which is also a strength of the RSS. And because the RSS has grown so much over particularly the last 20 years, it now has 3.5, 4 million members, and the affiliated groups have several times that number. Open to Hindus, obviously, and Christians, Muslims, anybody can now join these organizations as well as the RSS.
So in that sense, the RSS is often misunderstood than understood in the sense it's more, there's internal debate, there's discussion, it doesn't work like a block. There's a greater discussion that is happening internally within the organization, which many people don't know about. So has that played a role in the evolution of the RSS to what we see today?
There's been a lot of internal debate about how it can improve itself, how it can improve its outlook, and also how to mediate. It has, to a certain extent, the RSS is a mediation institution, because among all of these groups, they represent distinct interests. For example, on issues of land reform, welcoming outside investment, in fact, there's one of the org affiliate is specifically against foreign investment as somehow undermining Indian integrity and institutions. And so you've had the RSS, depending on what level the issue of disagreement is, to mediate the differences. And as it's grown, the RSS has also moved out from its original social base, which was largely Brahmin. Today, I would say that is no longer the case. It made a major, look at the Prime Minister, who is not a Brahmin, who was involved in the RSS at an early age from his small town. And real effort was made to push the boundaries, the social boundaries of the RSS. And with some success in doing that. And that they pushed that idea that caste distinctions are not important. In fact, in the Indian context, they should be ignored.
So, in many sense, and you see often reports, we have Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh and Rajasthan, 3 states which go to polls. And Congress has been kind of championing what you call a soft Hindutva of a sort, having these big statues of Lord Hanuman, talking about the Bajrang Dal and its ban. They've used that in the Karnataka election also. So, don't you find it strange how Congress is trying to define Hindutva and why?
I don't find it strange they're trying to sort of incorporate a Hindutva in their ideology, because obviously it has some popular appeal. I'm thinking of, the current major public figure of the Congress who several years ago visited Hindu temples everywhere. And there was one newspaper article I wrote, someone wanted to know what his gotra was, and he couldn't remember what his gotra was. Somebody had to remind him what his gotra was, because as you know, you go to a temple and often the priest will ask you what your gotra is. No, I wasn't surprised that they incorporate. They have to be careful how they use it, though, because you don't want to appear as if you're taking sides. For example, sides against Muslims or sides against Christians. Particularly, an effort is being made by the RSS to sort of reach out to Christians and Muslims. In fact, there is one of the affiliated groups which is specifically directed at Muslims. So you have to be careful how you handle the issue.
We're running out of time. I have the last question. What do you think is the reason responsible largely for the ignorance of the RSS and its function? It's about time that people really try to understand the organization and what it stands for.
I think you have to look at the affiliated groups, because it's the affiliated groups which are the public face, and it's the affiliated groups that interact with society. The RSS, for example, has a relationship with the largest system of private schools in India. The whole issue of education is very important today in India. What do you include in education so that Indians are trained for this rapid economic growth that's taking place? And so they're debating that issue too. But with the added idea is we have to keep in mind our culture, that people are not ashamed of our culture, and people, in fact, are proud of what we've achieved. And it's not just a few days ago landing on the moon. There have been many other achievements in this culture as well, so that they are aware of that, proud of it, that I think becomes the sense of what they're trying to do.
Thank you, Dr. Andersen, for speaking to us. We've really run out of time there, but you've really opened up the scene for debate and the next round that we're going to have, which opens up important figures which have been ignored, like Savarkar, like Golwalkar. We've not been understanding the role of the RSS and many other affiliates of it. So I think you've shed a light and left much room for debate in the forthcoming sessions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lois. By the way, stay for the following. You have the man who is the expert on Savarkar who is about to speak. No one else is as well informed as he is. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Pandit, for that session, and also Professor Walter K. Andersen for gracing Festival of Ideas with your presence. You've, of course, set the bar very high for day 2 of Festival of Ideas, and our request, Mrs. Pooja Sharma Gupta, VP of Marketing, to present Professor Walter K. Andersen with a token of our appreciation. A huge round of applause, please. I also request Dr. Aishwarya Pandit Sharma to present a memento from the Festival of Ideas to Professor Walter K. Andersen. Thank you so much, sir, for that absolutely lovely session on RSS from the outside.